Have you or someone you know been affected by mental health or substance use disorder? Well, you are not alone. Welcome to the podcast, Riverfront Talks, Substance Matters. I am Tiffany Moore, the coordinator for the Beaufort County 360 Behavioral Health Task Force. We're going to sit down and have some in-depth conversations with individuals who may have struggled themselves with mental health or substance use disorder, or perhaps know someone who has struggled. Either way, we're going to have some inspiration, motivation, and maybe even some tearjerkers. Welcome to the podcast, Riverfront Talks, Substance Matters. Welcome our first guest, Faith Overton. Faith, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Thank you, Miss Tiffany. My name is Faith Overton. I have been an acting advocate in Beaufort County for at least the past 8 years. Before that, my family was in ministry, and we've just had a lot of background experience working with all sorts of people. And the experience that I'm bringing today is that of a foster parent of a child born to two people struggling with substance misuse and mental health issues.
So your experience and your journey stems from secondhand experience from loved ones or people you know who have dealt with the issue themselves?
Yes, ma'am. Mine would be what you would call secondary experience. Though I have not experienced the barriers or the obstacles that come with having both substance misuse and how that can often play into mental health disorders or conditions, I have tried very hard to advocate for those that do, and I've also seen the aftermath of how it can affect children and families specifically.
Would you like to give us a little insight into your journey and your experience with secondhand substance use disorder?
Yes, ma'am. So this would have started about 4.5 years ago. I just moved back to Beaufort County. I was originally living in Pitt County, and for whatever reason, God said I should buy a house here instead. So we moved here. I began actively looking for ways in my community to connect, to see what things had been changing since I'd been gone. And I connected through, ironically, a social media group. I found a group that was moms specifically supporting each other. And I found a post on there that really stuck out to me. It was a mother looking for help to talk about some of the struggles she's been having with trying to find help breaking her habit of addiction, and also had a small daughter at the time. And my heart is often very softened when little kids are involved, especially. So I reached out and I began talking to her and trying to figure out what resources were available, and I was disappointed to see there weren't a lot at the time. This was obviously pre-pandemic, so we didn't know things were going to get tougher before they got better. So we did that for about a year. I just walked with this family as much as I could. Ended up ironically baptizing the mother. Didn't know the father. The father was also substance. He had a lot of trouble. He was a former veteran who moved down here from Florida, and was addicted to pills. Got injured during one of his trainings in Florida and just couldn't break the habit. So he was discharged from the military.
So it sounds like maybe he had a co-occurring disorder of mental health and substance use?
Oh, absolutely. That's what I would say. He struggled a lot with angry outbursts, mood swings, had a history of ADD. We suspected potentially bipolar, possibly PTSD from different experiences related to service and prior family experiences. However, many people weren't wanting to help him because he was also an offender. He started to support his habit. He started dealing, and he started being a pretty middleman of a dealer, not low enough to not be a bother to those in law enforcement, but high enough to be a bother, if that makes sense. So, and I've seen that a lot in these people that we serve. The habit becomes so all-consuming. Financially, they start becoming part of the process of distribution and making it, unfortunately. He left my foster daughter's life when she was about two and a half, and I came in around that time trying to assist the mother. I went predominantly through church to try to see what outsources were available. I was very shocked to find people in my religious community were not as open as I thought they would be to serving and supporting this type of person. and it led me to keep beating down doors till I found the right answer. Unfortunately, during this time of trying to find the right rehab, to try to find the right source of treatment that would be all-encompass, her father passed away. And her father, at the time, was the main breadwinner. So her mother lived with her parents, and her father passed away. When that happened, the substance, it got very heavy, and it got to the point where there was a potential charge against the mother. So when this use started getting high, she bowed out from me and my resources, so I didn't hear from her and her family for 8 months until I got a phone call. Can I stop by? Would you mind babysitting? I said, absolutely. I'm a sucker for bring any amount of babies to my house. So she came over and she said, I think I'm going to get arrested. I know you do not know me very well, and we have not talked, but I don't know who else to put. So I've put your name and your husband's name as an emergency contact for my child. At this time, we had a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old ourselves. We had always gone into the mindset that fostering would eventually happen, but we have a sucker for teenagers. We like them angry young folk. So we weren't quite there yet with being in the diapers and the pacifier stage, but we said, sure, absolutely. I knew how detrimental the system would be to a family, how hard it is once DSS is involved, and I just couldn't willingly let a child go further into that without someone standing up for them. I continued to reach out to the mother. About 3 a.m. the next day, I got a call from a social worker I'd never met. Can you come and get this child? Absolutely. And I came in and I saw a home that was not up to par, did not meet the minimum standards that DSS requires, but I saw a lot of broken people too. I saw people that had been struggling. We often talk about, I don't know why they can't do this or why they can't do that. Go walk in a home and you can feel the brokenness as you open the door of losing your father, of being the sole caregiver for your tiny child, where her father is now dealing somewhere else instead of supporting his family. And then see how that would play off of whatever existing mental health you have yourself. And I began to follow that family more and more closely. And I believe sometimes people don't want you to fix things. They just want you to listen.
Definitely.
So I created a space where, even though I was working diligently with DSS on all requirements, I never supported any type of rhetoric towards the mother or the father that was defamation of character.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Why did you feel it was important not to defame the mother and father? How did you feel like that would play out when it comes to the child? Is there a reason you chose not to do that? Because a lot of parents would.
I think it would have been easier as I stepped into the mother maternal role, and by not just saying, look at me, I'm better, and this person is not. That's part of where they came from, though. I can't change that I'm not your biological parent, but I can change how you see someone. And we talk very avidly with our children when it's appropriate, and we describe, why do people do drugs? Why do people have these things? Because we have all these rhetorics that float around our kids through the school system, and some of them are helpful, some of them hurt.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're people. They're not a number. They're not an addiction. They're someone who made a bad choice, or someone who couldn't leave a barrier that was placed before they were ever born. And the more you look at people and the more you care, the more you're willing to find. And I hated the idea of another mother really just talking smack about another mother. Right. And that was easier for me to do than the father, because the father, he created a domestic violence issue for both my daughter and her mother to go through. He created a lot of issues within his immediate family and extended family. So there was a lot of mental health things that the mother had to sort through on top of the grief of losing her father. And my daughter herself had to suffer through. And it was not an easy journey to see him as a person, as he wasn't that lovable teddy bear person. He was someone hurting, and his source of hurt was fueled by anger. And I'm not a naturally angry person, so I found that the best way I could do to combat any of that was to not participate in anything that was not helpful or professionally neutral, because at the end of the day, he was hurting. And I saw someone who wasn't taught the correct skills or nurtured once he got into substance misuse. He didn't see an out. He just got further in.
So basically, you were afraid that by speaking ill of the father, regardless of what he had done, regardless of what the mother had done, it would actually trickle down to your daughter?
Absolutely. She is 100% my concern. I have become further involved with substance misuse and studying addictions than I thought I ever would. My undergrad is in psychology, and I learned a lot about addiction counseling early on. And before I met my daughter and her family, I was avidly against rehabilitation. I was very ignorant to how the system treated people. I thought that there was more help available than there was, and I did not actively help the way I could have if I had been properly informed with an unbiased lens, I'll say. But at the end of the day, I want my daughter to know that she is more than her environment. We call it her starting point, because it's not where you're ending. And I think a lot of people would have benefited who started where that was the norm. Well, it was norm for mom or dad to cook something on the stove that wasn't edible, because maybe that's all that was available for them. Or I'll even say marijuana. Marijuana, people say, is a gateway drug, but I've seen people crippled by anxiety that couldn't afford anxiety medication. And I struggle to see someone unable to survive in this world, not just function, but actually survive their circumstance.
So basically, a negative situation actually brought about a positive change in you and your outlook on people with mental health, substance abuse disorder, co-occurring disorders. It actually brought about a positive change. And would you say that?
Absolutely. I would say I treated them as separate entities. I didn't see the overlay and how much they played into each other, and as a result, I became more informed. And I try to go wherever I can to create more informed people. And I'll say especially through church networks. We have a lot of people out there in different religious sects that have nothing but good intention, but the road to hell is paved with good intention, and I'm not going to add another brick.
Right.
So I have done my very best to encourage that. We have a rule in my house where you think before you speak and you pray before you act, because you don't know what someone else's house is like. Right. So if I can teach that to my 6-year-old who would rather watch cartoons, I think I can teach it to some of the older folks too. Yeah. But we try to go in those spaces of safe space. We actively try to create neutrality, and it changed my life for positive on that outlook of working with this demographic. It made me more aware of different microaggressions that add up over time, and it gave me a daughter that I didn't know I needed in my family. So I came out on top with a better understanding, but I know not everyone does.
That's really nice to hear. I like the message that you're sending. A lot of people don't understand that working in the fields, having personal experience towards mental health and substance abuse, it can have different aspects of your life to change. It can actually make you a better person. It can make the people around you a better person. And just thinking about that, I know you talked about the faith community, and we all know that there are sometimes people in the faith community who are not as open-minded as you are.
That's valid.
Have you tried in your circle of faith-based people to actually push this clear message out, to take the stigma away that most, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but a lot of people actually, I've heard this, I talk to people who have experiences with substance use disorder and mental health both, and that's one area they're kind of scared to touch. They may have been raised in a faith-based home, but when they need help, that's not the first place they're going to go to look, but you would think they would. So as far as the faith community, is there something you think that needs to be done as far as with those?
I think that's a great point. I often talk about how we experience different levels of trauma throughout our life, and I think one that we haven't completely opened up to and talked about as a society is church hurt, is what I call it, church trauma, where you reached out or maybe you did an outcry to someone in your individual faith-based group, and as a result of that person's reaction, that segue of resources was cut off to you, or you felt a certain stigma was attached. I try to go where I match, I guess. I don't hang out with people who don't understand that we all come to the table broken. The difference is maybe someone with substance misuse and mental health, theirs is a little bit more noticeable. I've tried to actively participate in conversations with key people that I respect in the community. I've tried to implement conversations with people as far as daycare workers. I had a conversation recently with two very wonderful daycare workers that I respect out in the community about materials that were being passed out by certain, I'll say law enforcement, trying to educate about safety. And they had a section that triggered my daughter. They had a section that said if you eat drugs, and they used the word eat, that you're gonna die. And it had a picture of a tombstone. My daughter's 7. She knows what that means. And her father, her biological father, it was a tough role to be in, he passed away last year from his substance misuse. We don't know if he overdosed on purpose or if it was an accident. We just know how. And due to COVID restrictions and my personal belief that a child should not see an adult hooked up to a machine, she did not get a proper goodbye. Due to his finances and different communications, he didn't have a funeral. My daughter does not have a gravestone to go and put flowers at for a man that was part of her starting point. And that's something powerful. You don't have to like someone, but I think we're very key in the South about respect. And I think aligning with the people who are already working with this family, already working with this demographic, are the people I try to talk to and change. I talk to a lot of the people that work at the summer camp here in town, try to promote things in different nonprofit circles, people who work within the legal community, about open collaboration, stops gaps of resources not getting through. But the biggest thing for people suffering in this is to know they have a safe space. And I always encourage different faith-based communities to have spaces of time where people can mingle. Like if you have a set schedule, if I always create gaps, like have coffee at your church in the morning is a really great gap. Have a food pantry. Actively serve in different parts of the community that your home church or your building is not located in. Sometimes just going 2 streets over will change your whole perspective on someone. So I try to go in those spaces. I've worked also a lot with some nonprofits in Pitt County, trying to collaborate because they do have a higher connection with the ECU. They have all extra resources. And, what can we do different? What can we learn? What can we adapt? A lot of my conversations is preventative, but also I'm very passionate about when that person admits that they want help. Yes. And one of my biggest things I always say when I'm trying to do a training or I'm trying to have a conversation is how you react as the initial person on that intake is going to change that person's life. I could have reacted. I did not know this person from Adam on a social media platform, and I could have walked away. But what would have happened? Little girl would have never had a family that lived close enough to know that you can work through this type of hurt, that you can still know your biological family and have pictures and have these conversations, but also give the power of choice back to her, which a lot of kids in the system specifically don't have.
So it sounds like that was one big thing for you. It was very important for you to make sure that if it was possible for your daughter to maintain that relationship with her parents,
Absolutely.
Her biological parents.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people had a hard time with this, but we chose to do what was called an open adoption. We refused to do anything or sign any paperwork that said a closed adoption For those that don't know what the difference is, a closed adoption means that any biological family member cannot access or talk to our child until she turns 18, and they would have to seek it out at that time. An open adoption means at any time they are allowed to legally contact me and ask my permission to have time with my daughter. That is something that's very important to me. We don't want her to be ripped away, and we don't want her to think that just because her family's a little different that she doesn't belong. We always tell her specifically, we're adding to your family, we're not taking away. I check in on her biological mother as much as she feels comfortable. We try really hard to keep an open door to that conversation. She's still fresh from some of her journey, so we give space and respect to that. But our hope is to one day be at a dance recital and all of us are in the same seat and be like, well, which one's your mom? And be like, both of them, and just have a picture. That's my end point, is that we struggle because I think sometimes we villainize the parent. Like, if you're doing this to a child, obviously you're a terrible person. Sometimes it's ignorance. Sometimes it's really warped thinking. And sometimes it's just that's their norm. That's the family they grew up in. They've had those type of similar experiences or setting points. We try to make sure that our daughter knows that she's just super special, that she has extra parents, especially at Christmas. She's totally fond of that.
Oh, I bet. I like that. Sounds like you're really, really positive in the way that you approach the struggles that the biological parents had, but also the way that you discuss it with your daughter. Is there anything that you may be concerned about? Because your daughter's 7 now?
Mm-hmm.
As she grows up, like, is there any particular message that you try to push through? Like, are you concerned that maybe she'll suffer with mental health, maybe from the stigma? Because regardless of your efforts, society is different. She has to go out into society. There is definitely a negative stigma attached to substance use disorder. And I know you've worked on that because of the positive ways that you talk to her. But is there any concern there that maybe it would have a negative effect on her?
Well, I've seen the negative effect. My daughter has severe anxiety, and we actively work with her for it. But I think some of the concerns I would have later in life is I don't like the savior complex. I don't like the idea of someone saying, you saved this child and you just came in and swooped in. And I've had people come up to me in front of all my children and say, but which one's the real child? Which one's really yours?
Oh, wow.
And on that level. So I don't think we're anywhere near where we think we need to be. But my fear is I don't want her to hate her biological mother, because we describe it as some parents live with you in your home, and some parents are there to support you, and they're waving and cheering you on in the crowd. But both parents are equal to your story. And at the end of the day, we always tell her that it's her choice. It is absolutely her choice to be angry when she's angry, to be sad when she's sad, and no one else can control her and her body. And that if I leave nothing in this world, I will make sure my girls know, both girls, that they are in control 100% of the time, especially with their own feelings and their own body. And that's just something that I'm very protective of, is making sure people understand what it means to walk as a foster parent, what it means to love someone indirectly. Because I love both of her parents, because they're a part of her. I see her eyes as some of her parents. I see her smile, her laugh. And I can't love her if I only love bits and pieces. And I tell her, I don't just love you when you're good. I love all the parts. So I have to love all the parts of both biological parents. Even if they don't necessarily always like me or have loved me in the past, that doesn't determine my choice to love them, because they are people and they did the very best they could.
Commendable.
I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of positive psychology, and that we have the power to change a little bit. And my dad always taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it'll change someone's life. Mm-hmm. And she gave me the biggest kindness by putting me as an emergency contact. She could have trusted anyone, with her child. She trusted me to show up. And I've shown up and I've fought for this child for years. And because of that, she changed my heart. She changed my husband's heart. And that's the one that blows my mind. My husband grew up with a relative. His older brother struggled with substances from an early age, and that hurt his heart. And it was a wound I did not think I'd ever see heal. And I've seen him connect with our child, and I've seen him love differently. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of him because he's breaking generational things around what it means to be a man and what it means to love. And he's doing it by being the best girl dad ever. And we know we're not done. We know we're not done with this mission. And I hope one day that we have the type of resources for all the moms and dads and all the aunts and uncles and grandparents that love somebody to know that your person isn't gone. They're still there. There's just some pieces they need to pick up. And I'm really good at walking in the messy, I guess. So I'm hoping that just, a little bit goes a long way. And even if I can't change the whole system, I can't build roads where there's no roads, I can make sure that how I speak to them is important, that I respect them, I look them in the eye when I talk to them, and I make sure that anyone else in the room always remembers they're human and they're a person with feelings, regardless of what we personally feel about their choices. They'll get there. I believe in them.
Yeah. Recovery is a journey. It's not snap your fingers, kick your feet together. Mm-hmm. It's not an instantaneous thing. And that's one message that we want to get through
Absolutely.
To people. I'm going to piggyback and just go and ask about your husband and his brother.
Sure.
How's their relationship? First of all, does your, brother-in-law still suffer with substance use disorder?
I don't know. We tried to communicate through the years, and there have been times when we've been more successful. It's harder for him. He doesn't live in this county, so I think the county he lives in is a little bit harder to get out of. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it hurt. I love my in-laws, and I'm pretty lucky because they made a hell of a husband for me. But I've seen a person who's technically older than my husband be stuck in the mentality of when he started. Mm-hmm. And that's what people don't understand is how hard it is on your brain development, how much that you just stay in certain routines and habits. I think we're better than we have been, but we're not where we'd like to be. We've made more progress with our foster. Her family was more receptive to communication and awareness and wanting to work with us. I don't know if that'll ever change, but I always try to leave a little window open. I hope at the end of the day he knows that we advocate for him and that we love him. He was the big brother I always wanted. I grew up as the oldest in my house, so I was pretty excited to get all these extra siblings when I married into the family. But there's a road. There's a road you have to choose to be on, and I like what you said, that it's not a snap your fingers. I think that's the misconception, right. Is people either think that you need to be hardworking or it's linear. It just continues in a line where there's dips and wanes and curves. We've experienced that with both people that we've seen struggle in that. And the difference is you can't, when it's their time, they'll decide. They're the most motivated people I know. They just don't know they're motivated yet. Right. So I hope the door's always open. And I know my husband has more understanding and compassion that he's ever had before. At the end of the day, we're always about safety of our kids. We love and we do as much as we're able, but we also know what firm boundaries are. Yes. You have to have healthy boundaries when you work in this line of work, especially when you're advocating, when you have people with multi-diagnoses that are working in the system that might have issues with different legal things. So it's just, the door will always be open, and I'll help you as much as I am able. I'll go above and beyond, but you have to want the help. Right. You have to seek it. And I think that's really the hard part, is knowing who's a safe person to seek. Yeah.
If there's one message, and you have been so awesome, but if there's one message that you could get through to our audience, Because like I said, one thing we want to work towards is, letting people know it's okay not to be okay, to be able to admit that you need help. Anyone out in the audience, hopefully beyond Beaufort County, that's struggling with substance use disorder or who is dealing with someone that they love or care about that is going through that struggle, what would that message be?
That's a big audience.
We hope.
I think my message would be that you're not done. You're not done. Because the minute you tell yourself, I'm done, this is all I am, this is all I'll ever be, your battle, the first and the hardest battle, is already over. Because I think the power of you making your choices, of you telling yourself that I can be more than my circumstance, more than this habit, more than this family dynamic, more than this domestic violence dynamic, the minute you commit to that mentality, you will see the results. Because you're making your own motivation and your own story. And I know I've walked it in my own life, I've walked it behind others, and I will continue to do so. But I want people to know they have that power, and that I believe in them, and that there are other people that believe in them too.
That's definitely many people like me and you who actually care.
100%. There are people, and I think there's more people now than there ever has been. I kept telling people the other day, I said, there's a lot of positive coming. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot more to come too.
Yeah. Campaigns, education campaigns, podcasts, things like this, they're designed to destigmatize, but also to reach people, to bring them to where they need to be. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work being done. We're doing some of it today. Hopefully we're going to keep doing it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Faith Overton, y'all. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Riverfront Talks, Substance Matters. If you are from the Beaufort County area and know someone who is suffering from mental health and substance use disorder and may be looking for resources, my information is below in the description. We also would like your feedback to gather input about today's episode. Please also complete the short survey listed in the description. A special thank you to our sponsors, ECU Health Beaufort Hospital and KB Reynolds Charitable Trust. Like, share, and subscribe. See you later.